Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Social media can be really beneficial, and you can connect with a variety of people in different countries and learn things and all sorts of positives. But there's kind of a darker negative side. And when you're age 11, 12, 13, again, you're just not ready to navigate kind of the minefield of social media by yourself.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
G'day, this is Dr. Justin Coulson, the dad to 6 kids, the author of 6 books and the founder of happyfamilies.com.au. School holidays around most of the country at the moment. Kylie and I are taking some time off with our family. We hope that you're going to do the same thing for your family. Because it's holidays, we wanted to keep great content coming your way, even though we unfortunately can't be in the studio every day recording our podcast. But we've had some fascinating conversations with people over the years, and because we've got so many new listeners, we've gone back through the archives and pulled out the very best discussions that we've had. One of my favourites was episode 125. I spoke with Sarah Coyne, who's done a ton of research on how children and teenagers are using modern media. Sarah's based in Utah in the United States, and she's written over 100 scholarly publications with her academic research work. I started asking Sarah why she's so interested in researching this stuff.
Academically, I've studied the impact that media has on children and families for about the last 20 years. And it's been fascinating because media has changed so dramatically during that period of time. I have 5 children. They range from 3 years old up to 15 years old, 4 boys and 1 girl. And they definitely keep me on my toes for sure.
Amazing. Now, you mentioned with your research, media has changed in the last 20 years. Can you describe a bit about what you've found from an evidence point of view? I mean, when I sit here and think about what I've seen happen, I feel like media has become coarser. I feel like there's a greater acceptance of what would have been in the 1990s called vulgarity or coarse language or explicit material. And I think that the whole cable TV and Netflix and all that sort of thing has probably exacerbated that. But what else are you seeing in terms of the change in media? It's not just standards, obviously it's the internet as well. But what's really stood out to you from an evidence point of view?
So from a content standpoint, there's definitely evidence of ratings creep. So that's the idea that you can get more and more gritty content in, say, in America, it's like a PG or a PG-13 movie that previously would have been rated for a much older audience. And so we're seeing more violence, more sex, more vulgarity aimed toward a younger audience. So in terms of content, right, it's changing. But then just in terms of like the devices that we use, I remember when I was like 21 years old, and I think my husband got me a cell phone, and I said, why would I ever use this? Like, why would I ever need to text you? I'll just call you from my office phone, right? And he's like, come on, you study media. What is wrong with you, right? So clearly we got on board with that one. And just the accessibility, the portability of media has just increased dramatically. And so we are living with computers in our pockets from a very young age. So the evidence suggests that first smartphone ownership is about age 10 right now. So really, really young age, we are living with these little devices and computers in our hand at almost all times.
So when you say first smartphone ownership is around age 10, this is fascinating to me because one of the most common questions that I get from people who are watching, following, listening is what's the right age for my child to get a mobile phone? And I've always said, well, kids don't need smartphones, they need smart parents, and smart parents get their kids dumb phones. But it's increasingly hard to buy a dumb phone. Every phone is a smartphone now. So that advice is kind of a little bit dated. I'm curious, though, what's your response when someone says the right age?
Yeah, I get asked that question all the time as well. And I always say it depends on the child.
Sure.
So you can have a really responsible 12, 13-year-old that could handle some smartphone capacity pretty well. And then another 12, 13-year-old that would be an utter disaster.
I know some adults who are utter disasters with their smartphones. So,
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So developmentally, a 10, 11, 12-year-old is simply not ready for a smartphone. They're not ready to have the power of unfettered access to the internet in their hand. And so I really like, and this is what I do with my own children, right? To start slow, with an old phone that doesn't have much internet capability, and then just gradually release some sort of restriction. And so by the time they're, 17 or 18, they're kind of full-fledged, and then you launch them. But if you give them that responsibility and power at age 10, they're just not developmentally ready to handle it. And so you'll have a lot of errors, big problems, big conflict, and so on.
I'm speaking with Professor Sarah Coyne from Brigham Young University in Utah about kids and tech. More right after this.
It's the Happy Families Podcast.
Imagine a home where discipline got results without anyone having to feel bad or in trouble. The Do's and Don'ts of Discipline is a webinar to help parents set limits with love, compassion and humanity. Find it now at happyfamilies.com.au/shop.
It's the Happy Families Podcast, the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now. And today it's all about our kids and their tech use. I'm speaking with Professor Sarah Coyne from Utah about her academic work looking at kids and technology. Let's continue that conversation now. We're not going to say that one thing is guaranteed to happen over another. But obviously, you've got hesitation from the data that you're looking at in letting children have their phones at 10, 11, 12 years of age, or maybe even 13. What kinds of issues have you seen arise in your data that would make a parent want to pause and consider going a little slowly?
There's so many different directions we could go with this. The thing that comes to mind is social media. So we use our phones for a lot of social media, right? And a lot of young kids are on social media. And social media can be really beneficial, and you can connect with a variety of people in different countries and learn things and, all sorts of positives. But there's kind of a darker negative side, right? So you can have high cyberbullying, high social comparisons, high levels of feeling like you're invisible or you're constantly excluded. And when you're age 11, 12, 13, again, you're just not ready to navigate kind of the minefield of social media by yourself. Even in adulthood, we still have trouble, right, with social media and certain activities. And so it's really about scaffolding how to use social media and phones in general to make them work for you, as opposed to your basically being a slave to them.
Right. And when you've got a 12-year-old, it's just all about the phone. And what I've noticed with my children is when they've got their device on them, and we've taken a very slowly approach, we have one phone that we call the family phone. And all of the children get to share that on an as-needs basis until they're old enough to pay for their own phone. My advice to parents has always been, if your kids want a smartphone, they can have one when they can afford it themselves. And so as my kids have gotten older and they've gone and gotten jobs, age 15, 16, 17, that's when they've gone and purchased their own devices, and they're primarily responsible for them in accordance with the way we operate devices in our home, according to our family principles and rules. And that's worked very, very well for us. But what I watch is when these younger kids have got the family phone, if it goes ding, they run for it. It's like, oh my goodness, somebody sent a message. It's so rewarding to get that message. And then there's an instant compulsion, an absolute need to respond immediately. Responses, you can't ghost somebody. You can't let it take 5 minutes or 10 minutes or a day before you get back to them. You've got to get back to them right away so that they know that the relationship is intact. And then all of a sudden there's this snowball effect where they can't get off and they've got to check this and they've got to check that. I mean, even adults go down that particular rabbit hole. It's a really compulsive sense that they have where they feel like they need to be on that device.
Yeah, so something that I study quite intently is media addiction. And so that could be a video game addiction or social media addiction or cell phone addiction are the three that are most predominantly studied. And most people are okay and they don't develop addiction, but about 8 to 10% of video gamers or users of social media or fill in the blank develop this pathological relationship with media where you're like you said, right? It's this compulsion. I have to check it. I have to be on it. I'm sitting here. I'm thinking about the next time I can play my game or I can get on Twitter or whatever. And something that our lab is doing right now, and I wish I had the answer for you, but we're trying to find out the root of a media addiction. Historically, research has just examined it once it's already present. And so we're starting from a very young age, actually like birth, right? And following kids over time to try to figure out what is our relationship early on in the, in middle childhood and early childhood and that early adolescence that then shapes your relationship with media over time.
So that sounds like it'd be like a 15, 18-year study that you're in process of collecting data. What kinds of things would you have to be looking at to work that out? Are you looking at the way parents are engaging with their children, how much media is available in the home, their environment? What kinds of things are sort of the variables of interest?
So many different things that we're looking at in this study. We're on wave 4 right now. And something that I'm really excited about looking at is we call it media emotion regulation. And you've seen it before, and you've probably done it before to some capacity, right? You've got a kid, they're at the grocery store, they're flipping out, they're tantruming, and you're like, oh my gosh, just stop. Here's a phone, right? Or you're at a restaurant or anywhere. And our hypothesis is that when parents are regularly regulating their children's emotions for them with the device, kids struggle to learn how to cope with strong feelings in the real world without the help of media. So they're really relying on media as a coping mechanism, which then could lead to perhaps addiction later on. So that's something that we're exploring right now. Again, I don't have any results for you because we're only on wave 4, but anecdotally and theoretically, you'd expect that to be related.
Wow. So if a child is not able to regulate for themselves, they're relying on that external contingency of having the device in their hand to soothe them and take their mind away from the big emotions that are welling up inside them. It seems like that leads them to rely on tech as a coping mechanism or perhaps as an escape. So once they're in their adolescent years, they just gravitate to it. It's where they get their peace. It's where they get their soothing. It's where they feel calm and back in control. They feel a sense of relatedness to whoever they're gaming with or connecting with, and that solves their problem in the short term.
Yeah, and in fact, those types of items are on media addiction measures in adolescence and adulthood. And so we're trying to see if there's kind of a childhood root to some of those.
That's Professor Sarah Coyne. You can hear the full interview on episode 125 of the Parenting in Perspective podcast series right here on the Happy Families podcast. Just scroll back through your app until you get to episode 125 and have a listen. It's a fascinating conversation. Looking forward to another Happy Families podcast tomorrow with Kylie, Mrs. Happy Families, and we're looking forward to firing up a whole lot of brand new podcasts, brand new topics, and a whole lot of new content for you as soon as the school holidays are done. In the meantime, if you're enjoying the podcast, we'd love it if you jump onto Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating and review. Those ratings and reviews are what Apple uses to decide whether or not it's going to stick our podcast in front of other people so that they can find out about it and make their family happier. So please jump on there. We really appreciate it when you get to do that. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Our executive producer is Craig Bruce. And if you'd like more info about making your family happier, you can get everything you need at happyfamilies.com.au.